Dallas, Texas has always had a history with Rob. Our PR has had the same two Robs, Grayson and Cosma, on almost every PR since Smash Ultimate's release. However, in the return of tournaments post-COVID, sitting alongside Rob in the PR were two Steves, Yanni and Trey 5, and one Kazuya, Burr. That was a year ago. Fast forward to today, and there are a total of 3 Robs, 2 Kazuyas, and 1 Steve that make up 6 of 10 of our current PR. Over half of the top 10 players this season are Rob, Kazuya, and Steve. Is it a coincidence that in this same time period, tournament entrants are also at an all-time low when compared to the time before DLC Pack 2? Almost every discussion regarding the banning of Steve and Kazuya talk about their impact at the top level, but fail to elaborate on the ramifications these characters have had on arguably the most important level of tournament, the local level. Today, I'm going to talk about the different Steves and Kazuyas in my region, and the effect they've had on the DFW, aka Dallas-Fort Worth scene. Let's take a look at the previously mentioned Robs, Steves, and Kazuyas that have been on the DFW PR. Like I said during the introduction, these two Robs, Grayson and Cosma, are an eternal staple to the DFW scene. They've played since Smash 4 and since the beginning of Smash Ultimate. Another relevant player that has been a part of the scene for a while is Burr. He's been PR multiple times since Ultimate's release, as his Inkling and Terry brought fierce competition at tournaments. These other players on the screen though, don't share such a rich history with the game. Yanni was an unimpressive Luigi main before Steve was released, often getting 33rd and never placing top 8 at locals. However, during the COVID era, he picked up Steve and grinded Wi-Fi religiously, eventually leading him to become one of the best players in DFW and in the world. Moving on, Hippo, yes, me, used to be a Pichu main pre-COVID. I was also a pretty unremarkable player, a 1-2er who never placed top 8 and caused 0 upsets, except for the time I upset the best Pichu in the region. Get fucked, Marcel. Anyways, post-COVID wasn't much different for me. I didn't grind during COVID as Wi-Fi Pichu wasn't very good, and so my results stayed the same, unremarkable. That is until I picked up and learned Kazuya. Now I consistently top 8 at locals and on PR. For the last two, Atomic and Trey 5, they both never played Smash Ultimate competitively before COVID. They picked up their respective mains, Rob and Steve, and grinded during the Wi-Fi era. Now, they're both insane PR players that have caused many upsets at the local and major levels. Now that you have some context on these players, you can clearly see that some of these players are carried. Ignoring the Robs for now, Yanni has openly admitted to being carried multiple times on Twitter, and I'm definitely not the first to admit that Kazuya can carry a player extremely hard. But what does it even matter if someone is carried? The main problem of these characters carrying so hard is the resulting and inevitable popularity of these characters. If you can just pick a character and easily start winning, why not main them? I personally know many players of all skill levels in Dallas that go to a tournament and get double eliminated by either Rob, Steve, or Kazuya at every local every week. This is obviously very frustrating for low to mid-level players, but for a top-level player, it's expected. Naturally, as a top player gets deeper in the bracket, they'll face the same opposing top players. This phenomenon would usually be fine in a quote-unquote normal region, but in DFW, achieving top 8 will almost always require you to fight one of several Robs, Steves, or Kazuyas. And it definitely doesn't help that these matchups are infamously not fun to play against either. Steve and Kazuya both require you to play in a certain way that many players agree is degenerate and not fun to fight. This has unfortunately resulted in a few top players not going to tournaments anymore. Notoriously, Oryx, a historic and unanimously respected PR player in DFW since the Smash 4 days, has stopped going to tournaments completely as a result of the Kazuya and Steve dominance. You may just write this off as laziness and refusing to adapt, but going to tournaments and paying money just to play the same matchups that you don't even like, surprisingly isn't fun to some people. And at the end of the day, if tournaments aren't fun, there's no obligation to go. Top players do only make up a fraction of the player base though, but another problem lies in the mid to low level of players. Like I said before, if Steve and Kazuya are so easy to pick up and win with, why wouldn't everyone main them? Well, there have been many cases of new, young, or, and excuse my French, bad players picking up Kazuya or Steve and causing bracket shifting upsets. Just to cite some examples, let's take a look at 14-year-old Steve main DJ Don. His first offline tournament was in 2022, and in less than a year, he's upset previous and current DFW PR players. Another egregious example would be 16-year-old Kazuya main Skeleton. Before picking up Kazuya, he was an 0-2 to 1-2er, having a sub 50% win rate in a bunch of tournaments. Now though, after picking up Kazuya, admittedly, he still will go 2-2 or worse half of the time, but has the added benefit of some insane DFW and state PR upsets, simply because the matchup favored Kazuya. Everything I've said so far supports the main argument for Kazuya and Steve killing the game. Their ease, popularity, and degeneracy have directly caused many players to stop watching and attending tournaments as often, and in some extreme cases, completely killing their interest in the game. This is all true, but I still believe that these two characters are not killing the game, even at the local level. I do concede that they are a factor in the lowered tournament entrance recently in DFW. Believe it or not though, there are people that actually like to play these matchups, and want to overcome this obstacle, just like any other matchup, me included. Kazuya and Steve might continue to grow in popularity, and might even grow in results, but it's clear that they aren't unstoppable. Of course, at the top level of competition, both characters' weaknesses have been clearly exploited by top level players capable of expertly piloting their character. But this whole video so far has been talking about the local level, so how does it look over down in Dallas? Even at the local level of DFW, between the two characters, Kazuya and Steve, the only one of them to be ranked number 1 is Burr's Kazuya, and that was only for 1 quarter. These characters aren't consistently at the top of our PR because even players at the local level are capable of exploiting their weaknesses, outplaying the players, and ultimately beating them. The constant upsets against these top Kazuyas and Steves in our region is proof of everyone's progress in learning the matchup. Take these two consistently PR players, Burr's Kazuya and Chef's Falco. Looking at their record from the outside, it would seem that clearly Chef is totally lost in this matchup. But at a recent major, Rise and Grind, Chef had to face off against Nito, a notable Kazuya that's ranked 7th on the SoCal PR. Chef showed extreme mastery in this matchup, expertly using low pokes like Falco down tilt, and completely dismantling Nito during his disadvantaged state. It was a swift and explosive 2-0 in Chef's favor. After playing that matchup so many times with Burr, of course Chef would have a handle on that matchup. And speaking of Chef, he also has a solid winning record on Yanni's Steve. I believe that this is proof that Kazuya and Steve are matchups that can be learned and mastered even at the local level. But despite the matchups being able to be learned, this still doesn't solve the core problem that Kazuya and Steve bring to the table. Not everybody wants to learn and play these matchups, leading to cases like previously mentioned Oryx quitting the game because he thinks playing against Kazuya and Steve is simply not fun. And low-level players, which make up the majority of the player base, definitely don't want to learn these matchups either. But I still assert that this isn't killing the game. It's only detrimental to its growth. This problem is also vastly intensified in DFW, as we're the only region in the whole world that has this specific concentration of characters. You could also argue that this isn't a problem at all, and that DFW is learning the Rob, Kazuya, and Steve matchup exponentially faster than all the other regions in the world. Take a look at Georgia. They're probably learning the Roy and Joker matchup at a crazy pace, as they have a high concentration of top level reps of those characters. There are many ways to look at this situation, both positive and negative, but once again, I'm beating around the bush. It still does not stop the fact that players are not going to tournaments because of Kazuya and Steve. So, for the last stretch of this video, I present the elephant in the room. Do you think that these are justifiable grounds for banning Kazuya and Steve? These two characters are actively making competitors quit and making spectators leave the stream. There's no other solution to this problem either, other than praying for patches from Nintendo. Any half-assed and in-between fixes to these characters, like arbitrary rules or in-game handicaps, would never be universally agreed on. We don't even have a universal stage list yet, 4 years into the game's life. There are only 2 viable choices. 1, we ban Kazuya and Steve, alienating the new players who picked up these characters. Or 2, we let them stay, which will unfortunately drive away and demotivate players that do not like playing the playstyle required to beat these characters. That's all for this video. Believe it or not, I think I stayed pretty unbiased in this conversation. I just honestly believe that they are not killing the game, just hemorrhaging its growth. Right now, I could be swayed to either side of the ban fence. Let me read y'all's opinions on banning about this below. Maybe you can win me and some other people over to your side of the fence. And shoutouts to DFW, coolest sub-region ever, and I'm glad that I live here and I got to make a video about the boys. For the rest of y'all outside, this region is actually cursed as shit, like 5 Kazuyas, 6 Robs, and 7 Steves. And those aren't even made up numbers, by the way. I can name all of those guys. Please, send help. Okay, thanks, I'm Hippo, bye.